Today's poem is called Hawk Roosting by Ted Hughes. And pretty much the speaker of this poem is a hawk who's looking down on the earth beneath him. He begins the poem perched at the top of the tree and he's waiting to swoop on his next prey. His attitude and his tone are very arrogant and he compares himself to God. He is very proud of his place in the food chain and the fact that he can choose who lives and who dies. He doesn't want the natural order of things being disrupted at all. And we can see this through the language and through the structure, which we'll speak about as we move through the poem. It's really helpful to know a little bit about Ted Hughes as a writer as well. So pretty much he was interested in the natural world, in hunting and fishing. He comments on a sense of timelessness, of continuity, the presence of violence in the world, and he points out that although violence is evil, it will always exist. So hawks are found actually in all of the continents. So could this insinuate that violence is universal? It's everywhere. It's an innate part of nature. The poem was controversial when it was first published, so some people thought that it might be an allegory, so basically a text that represents real events or real people, for human nature. So does this hawk represent kind of a murderous tyrant? Does it represent particular dictators of the past, or rules around using violence or fear and how it has been allowed? He actually asserted that maybe it was just his representation of how he saw nature and the brutality of nature. He actually said at one point, I was looking at the hawk's natural way of thinking. So it's whether or not we believe or he did it deliberately so his readers would realise, is he a representation of the hawk? Is it a dictator? Is he just looking at the literal way that hawks live? And they survive with their position at the top of the hierarchy. There are some theories about how the media kind of demonised him due to his very emotionless reaction to his wife's suicide. So he was very guarded at the time, and some of the very closed and guarded personality of the hawk, some people said, oh, does this represent how he kind of came across to the media at that time? The poem itself is in first person and it is a dramatic monologue. So this kind of addresses a silent audience. Maybe this is mankind. Is this hawk speaking to just mankind? It gives the voice an authority. The general tone and the language throughout is very arrogant. He plays God throughout, kind of like he is the king of the animal kingdom and therefore untouchable. We're going to make our way through the poem now, looking at particular language techniques. But before we do that, we're just going to have a quick read through the poem so you can see which are some of our key quotations. Hopefully you have a blank version of this poem or you can add to your own annotations in your anthology. So, hawk roosting. Hawk roosting. I sit in the top of the wood, my eyes closed, in action. No falsifying dream between my hooked head and hooked feet. Or in sleep rehearse perfect kills and eat. The convenience of the high trees, the air's buoyancy and the sun's ray are of advantage to me, and the earth's face upward for my inspection. My feet are locked upon the rough bark. It took the whole of creation to produce my foot, my each feather. Now I hold creation in my foot, or fly up and revolve it all slowly. I kill where I please because it is all mine. There is no sophistry in my body. My manners are tearing off heads. The allotment of death, for the one path of my flight is direct through the bones of the living. No arguments assert my right. The sun is behind me. Nothing has changed since I began. My eye has permitted no change. I'm going to keep things like this. So first we'll start with stanza 1, and you can see, you can use my notes if you like in terms of looking at the structure, but in terms of language analysis, I'm just going to talk over the highlighted versions and you can just make notes on your own based off some of the annotations and the comments that you feel necessary. So with Hawk Roosting as a title, just the fact that it is roosting illustrates that this is a bird that is at rest. It's still. His eyes are closed, and that's almost like he's meditating on his success, so he doesn't need to look to the world to know his place. So I sit at the top of the wood. The I here, this first person narrator, the hawk is controlling the poem, and you'll notice later on that it ends with I as well. So it essentially begins and ends with I, reflecting this hawk's arrogance. It's all about him. So I sit at the top of the wood, so the hawk is physically up high, and it also symbolises its powerful position over the rest of nature as well. In action, no falsifying dream. So the reality is better than dreaming for him. He doesn't need to lie. He enjoys his position as the top of the food chain. Between my hooked head and hooked feet, so you've got a repetition of hooked there. And interestingly, these two lines, between my hooked head and hooked feet, or in sleep, rehearse perfect kills and eat. So this is our only rhyming couplet in the whole poem. And this kind of emphasises how precise these kills are, perfect kills and eat. You'll notice as well as you go through the poem, it has lots of full stops at the end of many of the stanzas, and that gives it a very decisive feel. Like the hawk is in complete control. It stops and it starts whenever it feels necessary. Nothing else is controlling it. With regard to our repetition of hooked there as well, it just highlights his powerful features and how it's essentially a predator. And was built and designed and evolved to continue to be one. Or in sleep, rehearse perfect kills and eat. So this illustrates the hawk's violence, and it's emphasised as it thinks of killing even when it's asleep. Got a nice verb, rehearse, and this adjective, or now, basically look at your adjective, perfect kills there. Okay, stanza 2. The convenience of the high trees, with a nice exclamation mark. The air's buoyancy and the sun's ray are of advantage to me, and the earth's face upward for my inspection. So we'll look at convenience first, and I'll actually compare this with the idea of convenience and advantage, because it sounds as if nature has kind of been designed to suit the hawk. All aspects of nature are kind of designed for the hawk's ease of being the perfect killer, being allowed to be so. The exclamation mark shows that the hawk kind of enjoys this position of power. The earth face upward for my inspection. So the hawk looks down on everything, both literally and figuratively. And in terms of inspection, it kind of sounds quite sinister and tyrannical, even kind of scrutinising earth. I'm looking down on you. I'm the person, excuse the bell, I'm the person that's in control. I am above the earth. In other words, I am God. And if you just take a moment to look at the structure of the poem in this, so we've got quatrains, 4-line stanzas, and this can kind of insinuate this steady, calm pace, and it mirrors the hawk's measured control over the woodland. It won't be rushed in any way. It will do it at its own time, because it is the one that's in control. So let's look at our third stanza. My feet are locked upon the rough bark. So we've got here really harsh examples of consonants. So we've got the locked upon the rough bark. So listen to these harsh sounds, this harsh consonants, and this references the hawk's kind of tight grip on the branch. It took the whole of creation to produce my foot, my each feather. Now I hold creation in my foot. So there's a sense of pride coming through this now. It suggests that God had to work really hard to create the hawk, but now nature and God are presented as tiny prey at the hawk's mercy. So now he is God in a sense. We've got the repetition of creation as well, and it's also been capitalised as well. So this emphasises the arrogance and this sense of God delusion that the narrator has. Or fly up and revolve it all slowly. I kill where I please because it is all mine. There is no sophistry in my body. My manners are tearing off heads. So let's have a look at line 13. Or fly up and revolve it all slowly. So with revolve, we've got like a nice verb there. And it's quite a nice one because it's kind of like he refers to creation and ideas about power and how they flow from one stanza to the other. So reflecting how the hawk's how it's the hawk's dominant concern. Even the idea of revolve it all slowly, this verb revolve, it's kind of like the world is turning just for him. So it's revolving so he can look down and seek out perfect kills. I kill where I please because it is all mine. This is really simple, very monosyllabic, so one syllables. I kill where I please. And most of it is monosyllabic. And this just creates a sense of control, almost like this is a very methodical way. I'm going to do what I want. There is no sophistry in my body. My manners are tearing off heads. So we've got this juxtaposition of manners and tearing off heads. And this is juxtaposing the politeness with extreme violence. And this shocks the reader. We've also got use of dashes at the end here, so this kind of slows the pace of the poem down with our punctuation, and you can see quite a number of examples of colons, full stops, dashes throughout. It's designed to slow us down, and this illustrates that the hawk is at peace, it's at rest, relaxed, confident. The allotment of death. For the one path of my flight is direct through the bones of the living. No arguments assert my right. So the allotment of death, this is an ironic contrast between life and death. Through the bones of the living, the allotment of death. So it shows the hawk's constant pursuit of killing things. It has the power, or feels it does, to take life away, to play God and decide who lives and who dies. No arguments assert my right. So this links to the idea of dictatorship that we referenced in terms of the context earlier. So no one else has a say or can challenge him. Is this linking to dictators of the past? Was this his deliberate reason of writing it, or was he just looking at the brutality of nature and that evolution has designed this hawk to be at the top of the food chain and it's pretty happy to stay there? For our final stanza, we've got, the sun is behind me. Nothing has changed since I began. My eye has permitted no change. I'm going to keep things like this. So you can see that there's 4 short sentences there. And this deliberate sense of stopping has this very matter-of-fact tone. It's in statements. It illustrates a sense of power. The sun is behind me. Nothing has changed since I began. My eye has permitted no change. I'm going to keep things like this. Short, snappy, deliberate. So let's look at the sun is behind me. There's a double meaning to this of behind me. It's kind of like the hawk thinks that the sun works with it. Nature is reinforcing its sense of self-importance. It's supposed to be in this position and the hierarchy of nature and the food chain. Nothing has changed since I began. So this links to kind of the circle of life. His reign will never end. And that's reflected through the structure as well. The same. It feels like nothing will change. Evolution has designed him as a perfect killer. His reign will never end. My eye has permitted no change. So my eye, parts of the hawk's body are kind of addressed one by one. I even said that earlier. So produce my foot, my each feather, my eye. So that's done throughout the poem, and it's kind of showing it's perfectly adapted to be this powerful predator. My eye has permitted no change. This is an interesting use of language there, actually, because it's kind of like it creates, or even this bit as well, permitted no change. I'm going to keep things like this. it's kind of like he's in charge. He decides the rules of nature to permit no change. The I am going to keep things like this creates a sense of certainty that's coming through. The hawk actually believes it can keep the whole world as it is. The sense of being this god-like creature, which is ironic, as the reader knows it actually can't control anything, but this narcissistic sort of leadership role is very strong part of his personality. And as I said earlier, it begins and it ends with I. And this personal pronoun, again, reinforces the hawk's arrogance. I think that is a pretty developed analysis of the poem. So hopefully it supported you in analysing yours in your anthology, or giving you other point of views that you might be able to elaborate on. Okay, so I'm going to be doing another poem very shortly. I think I'll do Ozymandias next, because it is quite a good one for comparing nature or power. Yeah, so stay tuned everyone for my next video.